There's something you don't realize until you're tired enough to see it. Chasing doesn't make you free. It makes you owned. And I'm not just talking about chasing people. I'm talking about that feeling inside, that constant itch to prove yourself, to be chosen, to be seen, to finally feel like you're enough. You chase attention, you chase closure, you chase success, healing, perfection, love, all of it. And you don't even notice how much of your power you're handing over in the process. Because chasing looks like effort on the outside, but on the inside, it's desperation. It's your mind saying, if I could just get this one thing, maybe I'll finally feel okay. But here's the truth no one tells you. Every time you chase, you're admitting you don't already have it. And that belief alone, that's what owns you. You don't feel free. You feel anxious, on edge, always reaching, always almost there, but never quite enough. And bro, it's exhausting. You start losing pieces of yourself to things that were never meant to hold that much of you. You wake up checking your phone for a reply that doesn't come. You replay conversations in your head, trying to figure out what you could have said differently. You keep giving energy to stuff that barely gives anything back. And slowly, without even noticing, you become addicted to the chase. Not the outcome, the chase itself. The high of almost, the hope of maybe, the temporary fix of being wanted for a second before the silence creeps back in. But here's the part that changes everything. When you stop chasing, you realize it wasn't love. It wasn't respect. It wasn't peace you were running after. It was validation. It was a momentary feeling of worth. And the second you decide you don't need that from anything outside of you anymore, that's when the chains break. That's when the weight lifts. That's when the peace hits. That's when nothing can freaking own you anymore. And when you finally stop chasing, something strange happens. At first, there's this weird silence. Like, your brain still wants to reach for the phone, still wants to check if they watched your story, still wants to replay what happened, wondering if you made the right choice, pulling away. That part sucks. Not because you made a mistake, but because your nervous system is so used to the noise. It's used to needing something to fix, needing someone to prove yourself to, and without that distraction, you're just there, with yourself. No performing, no reaching, no chasing, just you. And that's where it gets real. You start to notice how many things were pulling your strings, how often you said yes when you wanted to say nah, how often you stayed just to avoid guilt, how often you bent just to be enough for people who never actually saw you. You realize you weren't chasing out of love. You were chasing because somewhere deep down, you thought you weren't worthy without being wanted. But now you're sitting in the silence, and instead of running back to the chaos, you breathe. You breathe through the craving to be needed. You breathe through the urge to explain yourself one last time. You breathe through that little voice that says, maybe if I try again, this time it'll be different. And slowly, the silence becomes peace. It's not overnight. It's not glamorous. But one day, you notice it doesn't bother you anymore. The unread message, the person who never apologized, the plan that didn't work out, the attention that used to feed your ego like junk food. You stop needing any of it. And that's when you get your power back. Not because something external changed, but because you did. You stopped begging. You stopped proving. You stopped letting your self-worth depend on how someone else responded to you. And that shift, that quiet, powerful shift, that's when you become untouchable. Here's the wildest part though. The moment you stop chasing, the world starts reacting differently to you. Not because you became colder, not because you started playing games, but because your energy changed. And that shift is loud even when you say nothing. People feel when they can't pull the same strings anymore. They feel when you're no longer waiting for their validation. They feel when you're not carrying that silent desperation in your chest anymore. And some people will test you. Suddenly, they'll start showing up again, with just enough effort to see if you'll fold. Hey stranger. A delayed apology, a little breadcrumb of attention. But this time, you see it for what it is. You're not starving anymore. You're full. You're not impressed by breadcrumbs when you've finally tasted what it feels like to be whole. And that's when your self-worth stops being negotiable. You stop giving people access to you just because they remember you exist. You stop explaining your boundaries like they're up for debate. You stop softening your no just to be liked. Because here's the thing. When you were chasing, you were hoping to be chosen. But when you stop chasing, you start choosing yourself. Not in that fake, forced self-love way where you post a quote and hope it sticks. I'm talking about actually choosing yourself. In silence. In small moments. In the way you move. In the way you no longer explain your healing to people who weren't even listening the first time. That's what breaks the cycle. That's when you're no longer controlled by that need to fix, to impress, to be enough. You're already enough. And now you know it. And once you stop chasing, nothing can own you anymore. I remember someone I used to know. Let's call him Mark. Mark wasn't a bad guy. He just didn't know how to sit with himself. Every part of his identity was tied to being needed. He was the kind of guy who always replied fast, always showed up, even when it wrecked him, always tried to fix everything for everyone around him. You needed him? He was there, whether you deserved it or not. But under all that loyalty was a truth he didn't want to admit. He wasn't doing it out of love. He was doing it because he didn't know who he was without the chase. He'd chased the girl who left him on red. Chased the friends who only hit him up when they needed something. Chased success he didn't even want, just to prove to someone he was worth something. Until one day, it all caught up to him. Burned out, numbered, disconnected from himself. Not even angry, just empty. That kind of emptiness that doesn't come from one moment, but from years of slowly giving yourself away in tiny pieces. And the turning point, it wasn't some big life-changing event. It was a quiet day. He was walking home, no music, no noise. And for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel like chasing anyone. No urge to text, no fantasy to run back to. He said it felt like his body just let go for him, like it was done playing a game his soul never wanted to be part of. And from that day on, everything started shifting. He stopped replying out of guilt, stopped accepting half love, stopped explaining his heart to people who were only curious, never committed. Was it easy? Hell no. He had withdrawals. He questioned everything. But it was real. And it was his. And months later, he told me something I'll never forget. He said, I used to think being loved meant being chased. But now I know being at peace means not needing to be anyone's project. And that stuck with me. Because, damn, how many of us are still stuck in that loop, confusing attention for love, noise for meaning, effort for worth? Sometimes the biggest growth isn't in what you add to your life. It's in what you finally stop chasing. Here's what nobody talks about. When you stop chasing, it's not just about losing the noise. It's about meeting the version of yourself that was buried underneath it all. The version that doesn't need to prove. The version that doesn't shrink just to keep someone close. The version that doesn't check every reflection looking for who they used to be, but actually starts becoming who they were always meant to be. You begin to move different. It's subtle. You walk into a room and don't scan for who's watching. You speak without rehearsing in your head. You stop trying to sound wise or put together or deep. You just are. And that calm, that quiet, effortless calm that starts radiating from you. That's what makes people take notice. Not because you're louder, but because you're no longer asking for permission to exist. There's something powerful about a person who's done chasing. They don't fold under pressure. They don't jump when attention waves its hand. They don't rush to fill silences with forced words or empty connection. They're not playing the game anymore because they see the cost. And here's the thing. When you stop chasing, the world might not give you what you thought you wanted. It might not bring the person back. It might not give you a perfect ending to the story you had in your head, but it gives you something better. It gives you yourself. That's the win no one claps for. No spotlight, no applause. Just that quiet, steady return to who you really are when you're no longer performing for the room. You stop being addicted to outcomes. You stop obsessing over timing. You stop letting the lack of a response dictate your value. You start moving in peace. You start choosing from alignment. You're no longer ruled by impulse. You're guided by knowing. And that kind of shift, that kind of internal security, no one can touch it because it's not built on someone else's interest or approval. It's built on self-respect, on truth, on silence you no longer fear. Here's the part no one really notices, because it's quiet. When you stop chasing, life doesn't explode into fireworks. There's no magical soundtrack, no big dramatic scene. It's subtle, almost too subtle. You just wake up one day and realize you're not waiting on that text anymore. You're not rehearsing the perfect response in your head. You're not scrolling through someone's page to see who they're with, what they posted, or if they finally miss you. You're not in that mental tug of war anymore. It's like a tension you didn't even know you were carrying finally leaves your body. Your jaw unclenches. Your chest feels lighter. And for the first time in maybe years, your mind is quiet, but not empty, not numb, just still. You start noticing the world again. Little things. The way your coffee tastes, the way the light hits your room in the morning, the way music makes you feel when it's just for you, not some sad background track to your overthinking. And you start realizing you never needed half the stuff you were chasing. You just needed to come back home to yourself. That peace, it doesn't scream. It doesn't beg for attention. It doesn't need to prove anything. It just is. And once you feel that peace, once you taste that kind of freedom, even for a second, there's no going back. You couldn't unsee your worth, even if you tried. You couldn't pretend to be desperate again if you wanted to. You've outgrown the version of you that used to beg for breadcrumbs and call it love. That version is gone. And what's left is real and whole and finally unowned. So now ask yourself, who are you without the chase? Not the one trying to win someone back, not the one overthinking every message, not the one bending, shrinking, proving. Who are you when there's nothing to impress and no one to convince? That's the version of you that most people never meet. The version that doesn't need noise to feel alive. The version that's not addicted to movement, to drama, to being chosen. The version that's already whole, even when it's quiet, even when it's alone. And maybe that's where your freedom's been hiding this whole time. Not in becoming someone better, not in achieving more, but in stopping long enough to realize you were never lacking. You were just distracted, pulled in 1,000 directions by stories that were never yours, convinced you had to chase something outside of you to feel worthy. But now, you've stopped running. You've stopped chasing. And what's left is solid, unshakable, yours. No one can take it. No one can fake it. No one can own it. Because once you stop chasing, nothing can own you anymore. If this spoke to you, if something in you got quieter, stronger, clearer while listening, then go to the comments and say this out loud. I'm done chasing. I'm choosing me. Say it, mean it, claim it. Not just for views, not for likes, for you. And if you're ready to keep walking this path, to keep letting go of everything that was never yours, then hit that like button, subscribe. This space right here, this is where we do that work. No pretending, no performance, just truth. I'll see you in the next one.